Welcome, everyone. I am Jax Scott, and you are watching live on Outpost Gray. I'm streaming both on my YouTube, if you're over here on YouTube, or over on LinkedIn, but I can see both platforms. Welcome to the show. This is my new episode. This is season 1, episode 2 of Cyber Leaders Unplugged, and we're going to have some good conversations on this show. It's a limited series for this. I think I'm doing about 8 or 9 series for this. It will be we will be going live every Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There will be a period in November for about 2 weeks that I will not be going live because I will be fortunately climbing one of the tallest mountains in Africa. I will also be missing the Simply Cyber Con, so I'm kind of sad about that. Speaking of Simply Cyber, Space Taco is in the house. I love it. Yes, happy Tuesday. You just made my evening. So happy you're here. We have an amazing guest on the show. This is somebody I met actually a few years ago now during RSA, and that's a fun story, but Joy Beland is who's going to be on the show today. So a couple of key highlights about the amazing Joy and her background. So first thing, you guys all might know CompTIA. Well, she is an advisor with CompTIA. She also is, and where I met her actually right before I think she got this role, but she's with Summit7, who I think is one of the leaders in the space within the CMMC space, if you guys are familiar with that. She is their VP of Partner Strategy in Cybersecurity Education. She has also been a CEO of her own firm. It was first called LAIT Girl. I think it's because she lives in Los Angeles area. I'm just going to assume. I know she's in California. But then they rebranded it, which I love because I love pink. They rebranded to Pink Hat Technology Management. Joy is also a CMMC provisional instructor, which is a big deal, and also a certified CMMC assessor, also another big deal. She's recognized in the top 5% of Microsoft partners worldwide under Summit7. She was also named CRN 2020 Woman of the Channel. Yeah. Also board member with MSPs for the protection of critical infrastructure. And she has some additional expertise, insider threat, and driving cybersecurity frameworks for MSPs. So we've got a lot of conversations. I am so excited to have this badass chick on this show. So let's get her on the stage. Let's do this.
Let's stick to the basics. We both know what we want. Let's just keep it simple.
What is up, Joy? Welcome.
You are too much fun. I just love this energy at the end of the day. How do you do that?
It's because you're here. It's seriously I'm so amped. I love your energy. So I vibe. And then everybody, I'm telling you, people are pumped over here. Oh, Space Taco's homesick, but she's happy she caught this. So hello again. We've got Ben in the house. Will you be on Simply Cyber tomorrow morning? No, I'm going to be there, Ben. There's going to be a big surprise for the Simply Cyber fam at 9 a.m. So yeah, we've got the pump crew out there, Joy, for you. So I'm excited. This is awesome. It's been a while though. We met. When did we meet? It was RSA. I think it was 2021, 2022.
2021 it had to have been.
Yeah. And you were doing a talk that I just happened because CMMC was happening it was 2021. So CMMC was just starting to kind of pick up, and you were in a room or in a breakout area called Birds of a Feather. And I had happened to swap with somebody because I wanted to hear your talk, and you were leading the discussion with another gentleman for a different firm that you're working with at that time. And yeah, you crushed the talk.
Yeah, Brian Hubbard and I were leading the CMMC Birds of a Feather. You know, what I remember about that, Jax, is that I hit the trifecta that year at RSA. Don't ask me how this happened, but I was on a panel, I had my own session, and then I was leading the Birds of a Feather. And I don't know anybody else that has had the opportunity to do those 3 different kinds of sessions at RSA. But what I remember most out of that year was how much fun I had talking to you as the person who's just making sure that the speakers and the presenters are ready and in the room where they need to be. I had so much fun talking to you, and it was fascinating to me, with as accomplished as you are in cyber, that you were loving in being in that role, and you shared with me how valuable it was because of all the people that you were meeting. And I'm like, what a great way to get out there and network and really become a part of, volunteer your time. I mean, there's just so many things about that told me so much about you at the time. So it's really great to be reconnecting. Big fan of yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for making the time to be on this show, because I know you're so immensely busy, but it's like it literally goes both ways. Because at that time, I was still trying to speak at RSA and I was still getting over my speaking fear. And you just had this natural like bravado in the way of just holding the audience that I really was like, oh my God, I want to be able to hold a room like that one day. Like, you're very good at giving presentations and teaching people. Was that something that was natural for you throughout life, or were you nervous at first and then you became better as an instructor and briefer?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. I very much appreciate that kind of feedback. I think that I've always been an extrovert, right? And I remember in grade school doing show and tell, and I was always like the first one raising my hand so I could go. So it's always come pretty naturally to me. I'll tell you that over the years, though, in cybersecurity, with that as my focus, the more I know my content, the more comfortable I am. And I think that really just being practiced about the deck, understanding who the audience is. If you don't know who the audience is, starting off by finding out who you're speaking to so that you can kind of tailor to them. Those kinds of things have helped me drastically to feel like I am not so focused on having everything perfect and right, but more how is the audience receiving this? How can I give them better information or present myself in a way that's more engaging? And it takes the focus off of me and more on them, which is really what I think is the success of it.
So how do you read the room and know that you're engaging your audience appropriately? Like, do you notice if they're like getting finicky, or do you take, if people are leaving the room as a telltale sign that maybe you're not engaging them? What are those like things that kind of trigger you to go, okay, I need to probably tweak this a little bit differently because I'm not engaging the audience correctly? Because I had people leaving my talk on RSA, but it happens all the time. I've left a talk, but not always because I was disinterested. So I'm curious. Yeah.
I think it's eye contact for sure. I try to throw in fun stories or jokes. If I know people in the audience, I'll actually say their name while I'm talking, and you'll see people like kind of perk up. I ask questions, where I'm like, raise your hand if and sometimes people will raise their hand, and then I'll point to people and like say, I know you're not raising your hand, but just to have them feel like they're participating in it as opposed to sitting and only receiving information.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Ben Howard said they always say just picture the room naked. See, I've heard that, but I'm like, when I remember hearing that when I was younger, and they're like, just picture everybody naked. I'm like, that makes me more nervous. Like, I don't want leaving a room of naked people. Do you like look? I like eye contact. I agree with you. Eye contact is important. When I first started briefing, though, I would kind of look at everybody at like the top of their heads instead of like eye contact.
I want to look straight in their eyes. I want to see people nodding their heads, agreeing with me or disagreeing with me, whatever that is, as long as I can see that they're watching me. It really feeds me.
Yeah. Dave Meese, it's good to see you.
I know David Meese.
Yeah. Awesome. Hey. Good shout out to you, man. Yeah. Crushing it over there. Getting all those votes in. Everybody go vote. Go vote. Okay. So CMMC, like, this is such a hot topic. You work for a company, in my opinion, that's really kind of spearheading the cybersecurity maturity model certification. It started kind of getting rolled out in 2021. Correct me if I'm wrong on all this, but like 2021, it was initially getting rolled out. Then there was like a revision to it right around 2022, where they kind of broke out. I think it was level 1 and level 2. But now everybody's starting to, and from my lens and where I work, people are starting to talk about CMMC again. So everybody's starting to be like, oh my God, we have to get certified. We need to make this happen. Like, will you break down a little bit around like, what is CMMC? Why is it so important, and your role in that space?
Yeah, well, CMMC is a program that assesses or validates the implementation of cybersecurity controls. So CMMC does the validation of it, but the requirements that are based on NIST 800-171, it's a tailored catalog of controls that will focus on confidentiality of data. And the type of data that it's focusing on is controlled unclassified information, CUI. It didn't really start in 2021. It goes all the way back to 2016 when it started to go into contracts for anybody in the supply chain of the Department of Defense that was handling CUI. There's a thing called DFARS 252, 204, 7012. People in my world just call it 7012, but I know it's a mouthful. But really, it's that contract vehicle stipulated if you're receiving CUI, you have to do a certain number of things. And one of those things was implement the 110 cybersecurity controls. There you are, found in NIST 800-171. And they did that based on self-attestation. It was just like, we're going to trust that if we're putting this in your contract, and you are receiving the contract and being paid under the terms of the contract, that you're actually doing what the contract requires, not just in delivering the goods, but in how the contract is being leveraged by your company. And what they found out, of course, is that there was a lot of information that was still being breached through the Department of Defense, and it was critical information. They were critical programs that the F-35 is the best example we have, where a prime and some of the subcontractors and the DoD themselves had been breached, and the F-35 schematics turned out that it was rolling down the runway in an air show in China before it was in the United States. So that was one of the things that, they really started to take it more seriously and go in and spot check these contractors. And the DoD's Cybersecurity Assessment Center, or Defense Industrial Base Cybersecurity Assessment Center, we call them DIBCAC. We're going into these contractors and saying, well, you say you've implemented all the controls. Let's look at what you've really done. And there was an egregious difference.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
It was just so bad. And so the DoD said, the carrot of, look, you get to participate in contracts as long as you're doing this, is not going to work the way that a stick is going to work. And so we're going to pick the more critical programs. We don't know which ones exactly yet, where the CUI is of a more sensitive nature. And we're going to require that a third party comes in to do the validation of the controls. That's where the assessment comes in, and why you're seeing more attention on it, and it is definitely gaining steam, is that we're about to have a final rule come out on 32 CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations. And it's going to kind of bake the program in now. And, the thing that, for me, a few things about this. Number one, controlled unclassified information is handled by multiple agencies. It's not just the Department of Defense. There's 14 or 15 other agencies that have CUI and that share it with their supply chain. So the NIST 800-171 requirements have been out there for a long time. The validation program, CMMC, is fairly new, and the DoD is going first, but that doesn't mean that the other agencies aren't going to be following suit in a similar format. And so we'll see where that lands. But what it means is that there's both widespread panic in the defense industrial base for all these companies that were like, they keep putting it off. It's not real. I'll believe it when it's actually goes into law. And the DoD now says that unless you have your CMMC level 2 certification, you can't receive the contract. Like, you can bid on a contract, but you can't actually be awarded a contract if that's part of the contract stipulations. And then we also
let me ask something on that. So you can't be awarded the contract if you're not CMMC certified, even if you do the POAMs and everything and you get those in place and situated.
Yeah, and it's not going to be every DoD contract. They're going to start with a measured approach,
Okay.
probably Q1 of 2025. You'll start to see that going into the contracts. When 32 CFR comes through and 48 CFR before the end of this year, we do expect the CMC program will be live, meaning that a company can now call a C3PAO or a certified third-party assessment organization and proactively say, we want to have our level 2 assessment done, right? And in that kind of a scenario, there are a certain number of things, a small number of things that if they aren't actually in place at the time of the assessment, the assessor can give you 6 months to remediate that. And you get like a conditional award at that point, right?
But if it's not remediated in 6 months,
then you're out, and you have to start over again. And so the interesting thing will be how many companies are going to get in front of the line. And there's already lines. There's already a lot of companies booked, including ours at Summit7, to be an early adopter, because they see a huge return on investment. Like they want to be the one when the prime is looking through their hundreds or thousands of suppliers and saying, what is the health of our supply chain when we're looking at CMMC level 2 certifications? They want to see some green check marks in their supply chain, and they're going to be navigating, towards those suppliers. And we've seen that already evidenced. There are a lot of organizations out there that had a joint surveillance done with the preliminary program in place between DIBCAC and one of those assessor firms. And by and large, they're publicly stating now, we've seen a great return on our investment by being an early adopter. Our primes know we're getting more contracts that we're bidding on. We're winning more contracts. So it'll be interesting to see how many do that versus wait for it to show up in one of their RFPs or knowing that they're a part of a bidding, part of the bidding process. And now they've got a very tight window where if they were to win that award, they suddenly have to get their assessment done.
What does the cost of assessment look like for level 2? Can you break that down at a like high level of like what the cost, because that's one of the pushbacks is like, this is going to cost so much. But like you said, they should have already been doing this. So the rebuttal is, well, you should have already been doing this. In essence, this shouldn't have that much of a cost. But everybody's like, oh my gosh, this is going to put small business out of, it's going to put them out of business basically because of the cost of this certification.
Yeah. Well, and consistently DoD's response to the cost issue is, you've been saying you've been doing this since 2016. The only additional cost we're adding is those firms that will be required to have a third-party assessor come in and validate it, because the DoD is not going to pay for the assessor to validate it, right? So, I mean, they're not going to be looking at the cost of implementation as something that the DoD needs to take seriously. And trust me, it varies so bad. I mean, that's the thing, is that some organizations that are very small, and have limited access or have a way of accessing it through their primes network, however it is that the data is flowing through the organization, it can go anywhere from $20,000 to a couple $100,000. And, the more, the larger your network is and the more technical debt you have. And, CUI could be sprawled everywhere, where even if only 10% of your employees need access, it is everywhere. I mean, that's a huge problem in the supply chain. And so they have to really narrow down the scope of what comes into play. And there's a lot of technology refresh, upgrades, architecture design that they have to look at and say, is this how we even want to do it? Do we maybe want to just have an enclave instead of trying to do our whole company? There's so many decisions that go into it.
Speaking of the enclave, so there's companies out there that are talking about, hey, if you go with our solution, we'll build you out and we can get you 98% to compliance, because we'll put you in like this environment. We'll figure out where your data is, that is CUI data that's related to this contract. We'll move it into this enclave, cloud, whatever. and we're going to secure it. And now you're 98% certified. You've got like those controls in place, but then you're missing like, I think it's like 3 to 5 different controls that you still need to do. But outside of that, it seems like it's like a boom, quick fix. Is that legit? Are these companies being legit that are out there claiming this?
Not that I've ever seen. I mean, let's think through it, Jax, because you know how security programs work in organizations. If it was all technical controls,
Yeah.
wouldn't that just be amazing? Like if no user ever had to change their behavior,
Right.
if you didn't have to go into your policy for remote workers or password complexity
Yeah.
or acceptable use policies or BYOD, if none of those ever had to be revisited because technology is going to fix everything,
Yep.
wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah.
But the problem is that we have humans.
Yeah.
There isn't a way for a company to change how they handle sensitive data using just technology controls. It has to stem through all of the major stakeholders of the organization, the business units that are involved in that, human resources, physical security controls, the guards at the front desk, how, visitors are escorted. There's so many things that the company themselves who handles that data are responsible for. No one else can take responsibility for those things, right?
So it's going to take time. Yeah. It's going to take time to do these assessments. And don't be
It's going
fooled
to
by
take
the quick
money.
fix.
It takes retraining.
Yeah.
There's so much involved in it. That's why, this is a huge culture shock to most organizations. It's not an IT department problem.
Mm-mm. Yeah. And Space Taco, totally right. It has to be comprehensive. And 100%, this is securing our defense industrial base. Like this is not just wave the flag CSF, and nothing wrong with a CSF assessment. They're great, but a lot of times that's a non-regulatory framework. So you can do a CSF assessment, but this one actually is, we've got to make sure that all the things are in place, hence the C3PAO external validation to come in and validate everything is correct. And so it is a process. And these organizations, it's not only a culture change, I think, with the organizations internally, but within the defense industrial base. And I think that's what you're meaning too, is it's like, it's getting us to shift and we're being forced to secure our environment, because up to this point, before the CMMC, it wasn't getting done. From what I'm hearing you say, is like people were not doing it. They were just checking the box, but now their hands are being forced to do it.
Absolutely. Well, and even before CMMC comes in as a formal program, the Department of Justice has been demonstrating what happens when you just blatantly lie. I mean, there's been a lot of news about this lately. And, I'm not here to say whether Georgia Tech or some of the other companies that have been kind of publicly brought out as an example of what happens when your cyber program does not match up with what you've been attesting it is. I'm not the one to make those decisions, but I'll tell you from reading the court documents and understanding how bad the data leakage is, we hear all the time. I know that you know this. You speak to a company that has had this in their contract for many years.
Yep.
There's so many of them that don't even know what CMMC is and don't even know that it's in their contracts. They've just they don't understand it. Or they do know it's there and they just are not going to take it seriously. I mean, I've heard contractors say, I'm so valuable to my prime, I am not going to do this, and they will not be replacing me with anybody else. They'll get an exception for me. And that for me is just baffling, because there is so much risk greater than that company and their business decisions that they're making. I mean, these are the war fighters. These are our warfighters.
And they're not going to get an exception based on what you're saying. So why do they think that, even though they're not going to get it? Like, what do you say when somebody says that to you? How do you rebuttal that?
I think that this is something that's going to have to prove itself out just with the way the business goes, because
Yeah.
when they don't have what they need to have in time,
Yeah.
and now they're faced with losing the biggest contract that has kept their doors open.
Yeah.
You look at the value of that company now, because they no longer can perform on contracts, but they have intellectual IP, or they have certain machinery, they have whatever. And so, number one, are they going to go out of business? Or number two, are they going to sell? And is that sell going to involve pennies on the dollar? Because now that company has to be completely refreshed and conform to the compliance regulations in order for them to get back in the game and start generating money again. But what I say by and large is just what I have been told. There are a lot of contracting officers out there that have many years of experience in this that will tell you. And we had one at our CS2 conference in Boston back in April. And I think that's on our website, a lot of the different recordings of those speakers. But this one in particular was talking about what kind of internal shenanigans you have to go through as a contracting officer in order to get an exception on a contract for a program or for a supplier. And that's not the contracting officer just saying, oh, I've had them in my team for 15 years. I have a great relationship with them. I'm going to go ahead and give them an exception. I mean, it goes up to the top dog, and there had better be a damn good reason, because it's our understanding that that isn't a one supplier exception. It's a program exception. And is the top dog going to make an entire program exception for one supplier? I really just don't see it happening.
Yeah, you've got to be making something that no other company would be able to make. That's just extremely valuable. But the likelihood of that happening is rare, in my opinion, in the defense industrial.
Wouldn't that make it more valuable of a target?
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Good point. Yeah, it would be, because it would be dependent on what they do, how valuable it is, what type of data do they have that makes it so valuable. Yeah. Yeah. And then why would you want to give them
why would you want to mess with it? If you're that guy, wouldn't you want to protect it? That girl, whoever it is, wouldn't you want to protect it?
Yep.
No.
Yeah. Wild.
Easy.
So Larry asked a question about CMMC versus IEE. I think that's the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers.
No, I don't know that they're that closely related, I don't know, honestly. Yeah. For the CMMC, for the assessment program, there is a third party that's contracted with the Department of Defense called the Cyber AB, and they're the ones who are doing the accreditations, both of the organizations who are either the assessor companies or the consulting companies. There's a registered provider organizations, RPOs, and then there's the assessor organizations that are C3PAOs. And if you go to the I think it's cyberab.org, you'll see in the marketplace the different kinds of ecosystem roles that they are managing through their accreditation body. And so they have also the accreditations for the individuals, certifications for the assessors, and there's 2 levels of assessors. So the cool thing is that I have seen a lot of crossover in the auditor assessor community, people that are doing FedRAMP as a 3PAO, people that are doing ISO 27001. They already speak a language around maturity and auditing in the cybersecurity field. So when they sit in on the CCP or the CCA classes, which is a certified CMMC professional, certified CMMC assessor, they're able to navigate that boot camp and then sit for their exam without a tremendous amount of effort. It's good to have that crossover, but yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Hey, Rhonda, welcome to the crew. Professor Blackhop is in here as well, I think. Larry, thank you for that question. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Space Taco's got a question for you on CMMC. Does the CMMC work better with AI than the other frameworks?
Do you mean in helping to populate the evidence or the SSP, or how are you thinking that AI would be leveraged?
Yeah, I was thinking, Space Talker, are you talking about like better as far as protecting the defense industrial base with the use of AI? That's how I was thinking the question, but clarify if you can in chat, Space Taco, so we make sure we answer that correctly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a level of effort going into leveraging AI to help automation. And, as long as human eyeballs are always the final stop on it, there's a lot of things that can be automated to help you with their compliance program for sure. What some companies are still struggling with is how much automation is available or should be made available within the government clouds if this data is hosted in a government cloud. Making sure that it's used in a safe way, in a secure way is part of that concern and that conversation. But there's a lot of vendors out there that have AI in motion to bundle in with what they're already doing, but have it be even better.
I am very leery, though. There was a company that we were looking at a couple of GRC tools for our firm, and there was a company that came in that was a recommendation, and they came in hot on AI. They're like, AI, it'll do this, it'll build up your controls, it'll do a run, and then the next thing you know, we can give you like in X period of time a CSF assessment in like less than 40 hours, basically, like less than a week. Here's your CSF assessment of your entire org. So stuff like that, I always say be really leery because you need to trust but verify. AI is not, I would not trust AI yet. It's not at the level we need it to be. And I think a lot of these firms are still rolling out that AI and that machine learning for the assessment or even audit space. But
absolutely. And a lot of those programs, Jax, I think you're feeding in your documentation for your security program and it's reviewing that documentation. But I want to know, you are feeding in documentation for your security program. So how secure is that in the first place?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's some of the customers that we are working with, the type of CUI that they are working with means, hey, Matt, the type of CUI itself means that as you build out your system security plan, the SSP is CUI. Right. There's programs out there that even just the SSP is CUI. So we have to be very careful because now that means that the GRC platform that you're working in has to be FedRAMP.
Yeah.
Right. It can't just be anybody's GRC platform. You can't just feed CUI into anybody's tool and see what it's going to tell you.
Right. Right. I'm going to be interviewing Matt, you guys, next week on Wednesday. Wait, no, Matt, is it next week? It's next week, right? Yeah, it is. Next week, Wednesday, not Tuesday. We're going to be live streaming at the Wild West Hackin' Fest. So you guys want to catch that?
Nice.
Space Taco had a follow-up though. She said it also mean governing the use of AI within an organization, not just incorporating AI into the GRC function. And I think we're still trying to figure out as far as governing and the use of AI. There's just so much ambiguity there still. I mean, we're just now starting to see laws come out around it. Yeah. It's going to be a fun space. Okay. I can't believe we just talked about CMMC for that long. So we're going to pivot because we have so much more to cover. That's awesome. So there's one topic I want to talk about MSPs, but I actually want to talk about SRMs first. And if we have time but I have a passion area we may cover instead. So SRMs, also known as shared responsibility matrix. You made a post and I'll share it with the collective here of the post that you made. And you were talking about this on your LinkedIn. You were speaking at the MSP Summit around shared responsibility matrix, and you were talking about the limitations of vendor tools. And one of the things you even said in your video, which I want you to explain, is one throat to choke. And you really talked about like this impacting the defense industrial base. So can you kind of expand on what the shared responsibility matrix is, how this is impacting vendors, and how clients can have a better understanding of what their shared responsibility looks like when using a vendor tool or an MSP?
No, you bet. It's kind of a spicy topic, actually. It's fun. And it ties back in a way to one of the things that we already spoke about. But MSPs, by and large, for the last 20 years or so, they've really been developing as an industry. We went from just being break-fix IT people to understanding that, oh, a recurring revenue model actually will help us provide better service for our customers. Our customers have an expectation of what their IT will cost every month instead of just wildly fluctuating depending on what's going on the network. There's all these benefits to becoming a managed service provider with that recurring revenue model. But back in the day, the way that we won clients is we would go to small businesses and we would say, you don't have to have all these different people involved in managing your software licensing and printer repair, in internet connectivity, in managing your servers and setting up new users. We'll do all of it for you. And that's where the one throat to choke thing came from, because we were out there saying we will take full responsibility for everything to do with your IT. And to a small business owner, that is just heaven to hear. They're like, because they don't understand it. They want to do their business. They don't want to do anything to do with IT, right? So that just continued to evolve, that messaging over the years, that we will take full responsibility for everything. We'll manage all of it for you. And what we're seeing happen because of all of the cyber breaches and the liability and the responsibility is that messaging is scaling way back now. And managed service providers are saying, we have this package of these different solutions, but we also need to work with you on how you're managing your cyber posture, because you play a role in this also. And starting to kind of be a lot more delineating in their service level agreements for what they are responsible for, in what time frame. The next step to that is what's happening with the shared responsibility matrix. And this isn't a brand new concept. This is something that the DoD is pointing to FedRAMP and saying, look, that's what they've been doing. Let's maybe look at this as a model, because if you're leveraging Microsoft, I'm going to stick to Microsoft on this because that's the world that I swim in, but I'm certainly not going to be, there's a lot of great government cloud solutions out there. All right. But for Microsoft Government Cloud, when you go to the Microsoft website, they have a shared responsibility matrix. They have a thing called the product placemat, and you can show all the ways that you've either enabled or disabled components in their licensing. And then it shows you which of the controls for NIST 800-171 they are responsible for. Wow. Which ones they share with you, and then which ones you're responsible for. It's a very robust thing. And they actually went through a FedRAMP process where they had to do a control implementation summary at a great level of detail for 853, which is more encompassing than NIST 800-171. And they have a system security plan. They have all this evidence for what they provide on behalf of their consumers, what they share with their consumers in responsibility, and then what the consumer is responsible for. And they had an assessor come in on behalf of the government and validate that. And now that can be replicated or inherited to their customers. Because if you think about it, Jax, if I'm using Microsoft Government Cloud and I want to be assessed today, is Microsoft going to come and sit next to me and say, all right, this is what we're doing, because we provide the physical security at all the data centers. Joy does not do that. Joy doesn't hire an armed guards to walk around the Microsoft data centers, right?
Yeah. This is a good point. I love the visual.
That they have to take responsibility for the infrastructure, all that. So Microsoft isn't going to do that 300,000 times. They're going to provide the body of evidence that's already been validated, and then you can inherit certain parts of that. And in the CMMC world, we're looking at that as a model in the managed services community and saying, well, managed service providers can also say what it is that they are responsible for in the NIST 800-171, what they share with their customers, and what the customers are responsible for. And that's where we circle back to the conversation that you and I had early on of, these companies say that they're going to solve 98% of your controls. How would anybody do that? The customer has to be responsible for some of these, a lot more than 2%. But now if an MSP goes through and gets assessed by a C3 PAO, with their own body of evidence and their shared responsibility matrix and their system security plan, there should be some, if not inheritance, there should be non-duplication of controls. So an assessor coming into their customers has less that they're assessing. It's less burdensome for the customer, less expensive for the customer that's leveraging one of these MSPs, and an MSP that can do a one-to-many on that kind of an assessment. It's going to be a win-win for the whole ecosystem, but it has to be done right. That's the thing is, we don't want MSPs out there fudging it. And they are, a lot of them have been saying for a long time to their customers, we'll be ready for CMMC. We'll have you ready, or we won't need to be assessed, just you. And they're not paying attention to what's happening out there. So that's what the shared responsibility model is.
How do you feel with the emerging threats? Like there's always emerging threats, just like there's when I think of it this way, whenever there's emerging technology, there's emerging threats that go along with it. And MSPs play a very significant role within our landscape, especially with small businesses that might not be able to afford an entire like SOC center and a SIM. They're going to get an MSP to help with that. So how do you foresee and envision MSPs playing their role here as far as how cyber threats are changing? AI is coming into this space. Let's even think further out. Like, let's get wild here, Joy. Let's talk about like quantum computing. Like, where do you see them in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you still see them in the same role they're doing now? Or do you see them even like going away completely and shifting just entirely?
Wow, you're blowing my mind with a question like that.
I know. I wanted to go way out. It's like, I'm going to throw in quantum computing and see what happens. But that's what I'm like, yeah.
I don't think that I can give you an intelligent response around quantum computing in the MSP industry. Ask that one from Matt, though. He'll be pre-warned that one's coming to him when you're talking
Matt,
about
that one's coming to you next week.
I know it's going to blow encryption out the door, so I just don't know that we're all going to survive it, right? And it could be a meltdown of everything, but
he said he's going to tackle it for you. Matt's going to
very good. Thank you, Matt. I'm excited to hear what he has to say. I can tell you that MSPs are evolving quickly, and some of that is being led by people like Matt in the MSP industry that really understand the importance of doing what they say they're going to do. Like no more BS out there. Like our industry has to represent itself better because there have been some bad eggs out there. But also we've got the stick, because if MSPs are going to be required to adhere to the same regulations and certifications as the customers that they are serving, it's the first time. Like HIPAA BA agreement, that's not really the same thing. If an MSP has to go through a CMMC level 2 assessment and implement 110 controls just like the customers that they support, there's some blood, sweat, and tears in there. There's some true buy-in, a dedication of resources, a commitment that I see as something beautiful. Long overdue in our industry. I mean, Jax, you can go to a hairdresser or a nail salon and receive service from, and you do a nice job of that, and receive service from somebody that has actually had to get a license. MSPs don't have to be licensed.
Wow.
Anybody can just start. That's how I started my business in 1997.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to pivot. That's a great pivot. So you started, and you were in the tech space, like in the late 90s, you started in this space, and you started a company as well as an MSP as a woman. And you were a lot of times like the token woman, like the minority in the room. And now today we've gone from barely any women in the industry to, I think the last time I looked, 25% of women are in the industry. Depending on the organization you work at, can be dependent on how, like I will tell you where I work, we are very, very diverse. There are a lot of women in our organization, and I'm very blessed for that because we have a lot of women in executive roles, which you still don't see a lot of in technology. But how was that for you entering this field at a younger age, and then being a lot of times the token woman in the room, and then having to lean in, have a voice, speak up, have a business? Like I can imagine it must have been a little intimidating.
It was daunting at first. I remember that I was invited to join a local user group for like 2 years before I finally had the nerves, the courage to do it. Just showing up at a dinner with other IT service providers, and but you know what? I was immediately treated as if I belonged there. I think that for a lot of the men, especially back in that day and age, they were kind of happy to have a different energy in the room. And so I was treated with respect. Some of the guys, I will say that, like at conferences, they became my big brothers and made sure that I was treated appropriately, because there were, remember the booth babes? It was hard to be a woman in cybersecurity and during the era when there was booth babes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
People were inappropriate with both their language and their physical behavior. And I was escorted around by my big brothers at some of those things. I loved the experience though. Like my first conference was 600 men and me. It was a Microsoft conference in Dallas, Texas. And I remember looking around that room, and I finally met a woman, and she was like the wife of one of the IT guys that was there for the conference. And she was out by the pool most of the time. And I'm like, okay, but that actually didn't upset me or scare me. I thought to myself, the minute I walked in that room and started to look around, I was like, what a fantastic opportunity. Because I had so many customers that wanted me to support them when I owned my MSP, because I spoke to them in non-geek speak, and I had empathy for their situation. It was just a way of treating people that was way different than they were used to. Like you and I talked about soft skills before we started this, and that's something that I brought to the table. And a lot, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, a lot of people are really, over the last 5 years, really understanding how important that is.
Yeah, I love that. That is so solid. I have to just shout out to Matt and you. Joy taught me my first cyber course. Matt, what was your first cyber course? I only know what I know because of this very strong woman in my life. That is amazing.
That is amazing. I love, he's so sweet when he says that, and he said it many times in public, and he's just such an amazing champion and advocate. But you got to know, Matt was one of several hundred people in that room, and look where he is today, because it lit a fire under his ass. Like he was like this, it just, his whole mind opened up, and he hasn't stopped pursuing excellence from that day. He's amazing. He's a huge influence in this industry.
Best thing ever, NIST. I love NIST. So it was a NIST overview, and I need to get you one of those. I still need to send you 2 cyber chicks. You sent me your address too. I'm so slacking. An I love NIST shirt and 2 cyber chicks. So you'll be getting that.
I remember that shirt.
Yeah.
I love that shirt.
A huge bonfire, and I love it, Matt. I can't wait to connect with you. I've tried to interview this guy twice, twice, and something's always come up. So we're gonna make something happen next week, unless Matt, you flake out on me then, and then I'm really gonna come after you. I'll find you. Larry, he says, Joy, I'm glad you got your big brother supporting you every step of the way.
Thank you, Larry. Yeah.
All right. So, woman in the arena, you're helping other women in this space. And I know there's women, we've got a couple of women in chat right now. And I know that being a woman in this space, women come to me more often than they would typically, I feel, than they go to men, because I have men that are influencers in this space. And women will typically sometimes even come to me and say, hey, do you mind asking so-and-so if I could do X, Y, and Z? Like they won't want to go directly to the man sometimes, which I have found interesting. So in this space, what would you say to women that are in this space that have maybe some insecurities being one of those token women, or maybe they're not even in the space yet and they're trying to break in? What advice would you give them for somebody, and these aren't college kids, they're already in the industry or they're already in a industry wanting to break in?
Yeah, I love this topic. There's so much focus on STEM, which I think is amazing for young girls and get them while they're young, have them understand how cool it is, the great opportunities. And that is great. It shouldn't ever go away. But there's so many skills in current non-IT, non-cybersecurity roles that do translate very well into cyber. You actually had a post that had a graphic on it, if I remember correctly. You've done this several times. You're so good about this for different like pillars of security
Yeah.
understanding and the exams or the training or experience that lend themselves to them. And like I know two women personally that have been in project management. And one of them, when at my last job, I just was so impressed that she realized when she started doing project management for the cyber team that everything that we were talking about in our meetings, like it was so interesting to her. And she started to do her own self-study. And then before I knew it, she was like, can you help me get through, find the resources I need to pass the Security Plus? And I was like, hell yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Because how badly do we need
Yeah.
true project management in the cyber world
Yeah.
to have somebody that actually understands the basics of cyber and be able to navigate that with us? It just makes everybody stronger.
Yeah.
So communications is a really good one. We're talking about
Yeah.
cyber skills. We're talking about drafting policies, converting policies to understandable training for the employees. So training, communications, those are areas, and even marketing. I find at the core skill level of people in marketing, it's changing people's behavior,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Identifying what's resonating with them. What's my ideal client profile? How do I take this persona and influence it in the way that I want? Those marketing skills can translate very nicely into security awareness training, policy writing. There's just so many areas that I look at and love working with women. Right now, I'm mentoring a woman who works for one of the major accounting firms, and she's been in collections, collections and
Yeah.
finance, wanting to get into cyber. And
You can probably
so
deal
I
with
love
people
that.
well then.
I think that that's a no-brainer for us to
Yeah.
take those women and get them into the fold.
We have a LinkedIn user. Speaking of the one you were just talking about, I bet she's really good at dealing with volatile women and volatile people and calming down the situation. When you're in collections, you're probably not usually dealing with the most happiest of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So LinkedIn user, I don't know what your name is, but because it's just coming up LinkedIn user. So I don't know if we're not connected or something, but they're saying, I'm trying to break into cyberspace, but yet to here in Canada. Would you be my big sister, Joy?
I'll talk to you about potential path. Do want to validate your identity.
Please validate. Please provide your last four of your social, your date of birth. This is not a scam, I promise. Please provide your identity. That's such a
I can't ever agree to being someone's big sister.
Jide. I think it's Jide. Hopefully I didn't get that wrong. Well, welcome, Jide. It's very, very nice to have you here. I would encourage you to reach out to Joy. Here, actually, I think I
Yeah,
have her.
connect on LinkedIn.
Right there. Look at that. That was made just for you, Jide.
Thank you. Lightning fingers.
Yeah, definitely connect with her. I know we're coming up to time. We have about 5 minutes roughly before we wrap, but I want to give you a chance to just do some final thoughts before we wrap up the show.
Final thoughts. I think that GRC is something that is going to gain in huge popularity. It's going to gain a lot more value. I'm watching what's happening in all areas, my field in CMMC especially. And I think that gone are the days of CEOs kind of just making sure IT is working, not properly resourcing IT and cyber. Having the GRC role be something that adds so much value to the organization and shepherds in change and culture change. The people I know that are really focused on GRC have those great management, organizational, behavioral influence skills. And I just see this movement happening.
Mhm.
And I also think that the people, like the vendors that aren't recognizing the value of aligning their tool set with frameworks, understanding how to have the GRC conversation around their solution, they're missing out. And it's something that we're going to see gaining more traction across the vendor community, the end users, the consultants, the assessors. I just see them coming in to really align better in GRC. Yes.
GRC Mafia. We got the GRC Mafia in the house too. We got some Simply Cyber fam in here. They are up in here, so you're speaking it.
Oh,
You're speaking
I
to
didn't
them.
know that. And so I'm
Yeah,
happy.
you're
They're
just
happy.
speaking to And Matt is still here, I think, hanging out with us, not being on your cruise. Are you really on a cruise, dinner cruise or something right now that you're supposed to be? What were you on? Like you're supposed to be on a cruise of some sort, Matt.
I think he's not paying attention to the people on the dinner cruise.
Yeah, something. You need a skedaddles. All right. Well, Joy, thank you. It has been an absolute pleasure. I know the community loved having you. So thank you so much for making the time for us and coming on the show.
Thank you. Always a pleasure,
Absolutely.
Jax. Anytime.
You are the best. Bye, Joy. Oh my gosh, you guys. Woo! What a fun conversation and what an engaging chat. You guys are hilarious. Matt, you're supposed to be like eating food or cruising, and I'll see you next week. Better rock and roll. And I might have a gift for you, Matt. So Wild West Hacking Fest, if you guys aren't aware, I've said it so many times. I am going to be interviewing the Matt Lee. Not on Tuesday. We had to shift it because of I'm flying in for the Wild West Hacking Fest. So I will land on Wednesday. And then hopefully Matt will get us a venue. We'll see. We'll see if he does. And then we'll sit down and I'm going to interview him live on location at Wild West Hacking Fest. It'll be still the same time, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The day is just changed and shipped to the right on Wednesday. So I hope you all can make it. If you are new here, I think Jide, I think you're new. I don't think we've fully connected. And any of the new viewers that just popped in, thank you so much for being here. Thank you again for my community and all you repeat offenders. I would encourage you, if you are new here, go over to YouTube at Outpost Gray, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video tonight, you all, please hit it so the algorithm can share this out with others because sharing is caring. And that's all I've got. I'm going to get out of here and go play some like beer bingo or something. So I'll see you guys next week on Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.